Hi folks. Well, today I wanted to talk to you about a period when Scotland apparently led the world, and even influenced other countries to follow our lead. Now, regrettably, this period in our murky past is not really one you'd want to be overly proud of. For this was when we apparently led the world in the persecution of witches. So this all started in the year 1590, when an event supposedly took place in a small seaside town in Scotland that led to an explosion of witch trials throughout Scotland, and these then spreading to England, Europe and ultimately America. Now, there had been witch trials before this in many countries, but witchcraft related prosecutions then tended to be about an individual, one person, using some sort of power specifically to harm or damage another person, usually a rival. Generally, there was no association of working with the devil, and indeed during the 1500s, witchcraft prosecutions had been declining. And then in 1590 we come to the sleepy little town of North Berwick, a small fishing port on the east coast of Scotland, only about 20 miles from Edinburgh. Here's a map showing where it is. Now here it was alleged a coven of witches had gathered in St Andrew's Old Kirk, the church, specifically to put a curse on the King of Scotland, King James VI, and attempt to kill him. So here's a picture of all that remains today of the church. But the major difference with this trial as compared to previous trials was that it was stated at the trial that these witches were working in direct partnership with Satan, with the devil himself, in attempting this nefarious deed. Agnes Sampson, a faith healer and midwife, who was said to be present at this gathering of witches, was accused of witchcraft and interrogated under torture. Whilst Agnes originally strongly professed her innocence, she eventually confessed and gave the names of her supposed accomplices, some 59 other innocent people. Any Outlander fans watching will be interested to know that amongst the people she named was a maid called Gillis Duncan. Now, a wee note for non-Outlander fans, just to explain, Diana Gabaldon, the author of Outlander, has as one of her characters in the books and television series a witch called Gillis Duncan. Anyway, back to our real life story. Gillis Duncan, it was said at the trial, had suddenly began to exhibit miraculous healing abilities and would sneak out of her master's house during the night. When she couldn't explain her new abilities and strange behaviour, she was tortured, confessed to being a witch, and accused many others of witchcraft. Poor Agnes and Gillis were both brutally executed, being strangled and then burnt on the esplanade of Edinburgh Castle. Just a little note here, if you happen to be at Edinburgh Castle, you can see a plaque, a small plaque recording where these brutal executions took place. It's at the very bottom of the esplanade, really just at the top right hand side of Castle Hill. Unfortunately, as I said, it's a very small plaque and quite difficult to find, so not many people know about it. Anyway, back to the North Berwick witch trials. They became the first successful large-scale witch hunt in Scotland, and its brutal success made it the model for trials rolled out across Scotland and England, and then further afield over the next 100 years. It's estimated that approximately 6,000 people were accused of witchcraft in Scotland, the majority of them women. Many were executed, usually being strangled then burned at the stake. Many, many more followed in England, Europe and America. The causes of this mass hysteria that led to these witch hunts, I feel, are many and varied. We are at this time in the period of immense religious change throughout Europe, when Protestant Reformed churches were breaking with the established Catholic hierarchy. These new Reformed churches tend to have a very clear view of Satan's influence. He was seen as a very real day-to-day presence, an entity that was constantly trying to entice or trick people to, in today's parlance you might say, come over to the dark side, and then he would make them carry out dastardly deeds on his behalf. The church's view was that to protect society All forms of evil, especially those being carried out at the behest of the devil, had to be eradicated, no matter how brutal the cure was. John Knox, the famous Scottish minister who was a driving force of the Scottish Reformation, said, "For all those who would draw us from God, being of the devil's nature, are enemies unto God, and therefore will God that in such cases we declare ourselves enemy unto them." So the Scottish Reformed Kirk saw that quite clearly, that Satan and his acolytes were a real and ever-present danger. So was it all just about religion? Well, maybe not. Another important aspect to consider, I feel, is that King James VI of Scotland was very keen at this time to become King of England when the current monarch there, Queen Elizabeth I, passed away. England was, after all, hugely more wealthy than his impoverished kingdom of Scotland, and was well on its way to becoming a European superpower. Queen Elizabeth, often called the Virgin Queen as she had never married, had no heirs, and James had a very strong claim to the throne through his mother, Mary, Queen of Scots. Mary had been Elizabeth's cousin, and you may remember Elizabeth had Mary executed for plotting to overthrow her and grab the English crown for herself. Now, Mary had been Catholic, but James was raised a Protestant. England at this time, like Scotland, was now a Protestant country, and to become King of England, James would have to show he was a strong Protestant. The English lords may well be wary of a Scottish king whose mother had become a famous Catholic martyr. So maybe James thought that by being tough on witches was a good way of showing his Protestant credentials. At this time, James had sailed to Denmark, a Protestant country, to get his new bride, Princess Anne, and on the way back his ship nearly sank in a storm. When the Danish minister responsible for organising the trip was accused of poorly equipping the ships, thereby making them unfit to handle rough weather, he deflected criticism by saying witches had caused the storm. Subsequently, a number of women were charged in Denmark of being witches and having placed an evil spell on the ships. On James's return to Scotland, the North Berwick witch trials began. So, was it just all about politics then? Well, maybe only partly. One of the most disturbing issues I feel about this whole period has to be that the vast majority of people charged with being witches were women. The trials, conducted exclusively by men, were judicial showpieces with the outcomes almost certainly predetermined. Most of the women were treated appallingly, being mentally and physically tortured. The main thrust seemed to be to get them to confess and to name accomplices, much like you might say the show trials of the 20th century Nazi and Soviet eras. And then they met terribly gruesome ends, usually being strangled and then burnt. So, was it all really about male power over women? I don't think we will ever know for sure what caused this terrible dark period of Western history. And it may be it was a complex mixture of social, political, judicial and religious drivers that combined together to create a sort of mass hysteria amongst the public. The one thing we do know, however, is that this period of mass witch trials, which lasted for over 100 years, started in earnest following that so-called witches' coven in that little fishing town in Scotland. Now, if you want to find out more about this subject, you may find of interest a University of Edinburgh website that allows you to look at the details of the investigations of witches in Scotland by location and what happened to the unfortunate people involved. The information is taken from old legal records. I'll show you a screen grab now of the website, and you can see it's showing some locations of witch trials. If you keep zooming in on the map, it will show you more details, and eventually those details of those who were tried, as you can see in the second screen grab. I personally found it quite chilling to see the personal details of those poor innocent people, mostly women, so coldly recorded. I've put a link to the website at the end screen of the video. Anyway, I do hope you found this video interesting. On a positive note, North Berwick nowadays is a lovely little town. If you're ever in Edinburgh, you should take the time to visit it. It's very easy to get to by train, bus or car. It has beautiful beaches, an interesting seabird centre, a great little harbour, lots of nice wee shops and cafes, and everything you'd want for a day out. Here's a photograph I took of a double rainbow over it when June and I were down there just a wee while ago. Anyway, until we meet again, can I just wish you all the very best from Scotland.